Hey everybody. Hey y'all. Welcome to week 2 of Kindred. Where's my book actually? Welcome to week 2 of Kindred. Welcome to the Octavia Butler Mixtape course. I'm Dr. Brianna Whiteside, and I'm so excited to be wrapping up Butler's Kindred with you all. Let me know if y'all can hear me. I'm going to try to pull up the people who registered as guests first. So if you wanted to come up and you want to be part of the discussion panel tonight, go ahead and I think you should have already registered as a guest, but you can go ahead and request to come up on the live. How y'all doing? How y'all feeling? We are moving straight through Butler's work. I want to let y'all know that next week we're starting with the Patternist series. And so the first book that we're going to read is Wild Seed. I am going to drop the discussion questions tomorrow on the Substack. So if you're not already subscribed to the Substack, you're going to want to subscribe. The link is in my bio here on TikTok. Also, if you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel, so apparently last week TikTok let me download the course really quickly, and so I was able to upload it that night. And so if you can't make tonight or you need to watch the replay, it's going to be on the Octavia Butler Mixtape course YouTube page. And so if you want to be a panelist, I don't see anybody up on here. Come on up because we have some discussions. What is this? Hold on. What is this? Okay. We are going to be talking about Kindred. I'm interested to know how y'all feel. How y'all feel about Kindred? How y'all feel about Kindred now? Let me know your thoughts. I know people were running the Kevin hate account last week, and I was like, gosh, Kevin has no friends, right? And so anyway, y'all, how y'all feel about the end of the book? I know when I dropped in the Substack yesterday asking like how y'all feel, people were angry, they were tired, they accepted Kevin was okay. So I'm very, very interested what y'all think about Kevin. We need some more people to come on up as guests, as discussants. We can't just talk me and somebody else one-on-one. We need more people to participate, even if it's to come up and tell me how you feel about the end of the book.
Well, I thought the book was good.
Wait, not yet.
Oh, okay. Well, you said come up and discuss.
We waiting for more people. I appreciate the willingness though. Trust me. I appreciate it. Let's see. We getting some people coming on up. Hold on. Let's see if I may be out of guess. Let's see. Okay. Do I got one more? Will there be one more? Let's see.
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, girl. Put your phone on mute for a second. All right, so we're max right now. So if someone drops down, I'll just add another person up here. But y'all, we're done with Kindred today. Wild Seed is next week. I'll be dropping the discussion questions on tomorrow on the Substack, okay? And so keep an eye out for that. All right, y'all, discussants, people on the panel, what y'all think? Let me know.
Well, I'll go ahead again since I started first. My name is Tina.
Hey, Tina.
I'm in the Atlanta area. I know there was a lot of discussion last week about like not feeling Kevin, and Dana was getting on everybody's nerves and everything. I didn't quite have that reaction about the story. I can see why people did, but I felt like it was like I felt like her impression of what Kevin should be or what she thought about Kevin was a reflection of what she was trying to make Rufus be. Okay. That was the thing that kind of got me, because like she wanted her like influence on Rufus to make him more like, in her mind, what she thought Kevin was. And then when she came back And when she came back, when they finally got back together, and she realized that Kevin had some traits of Rufus or the times, I think that it to me it demonstrated her delulu, like what was happening. Like I should have been able, you're supposed to be this more evolved person, and with my presence, you should have been able to, like resist it. I did think it was interesting that he became part of the Underground Railroad and that he did a lot of stuff trying to be able to help, but it was limited in scope of what he could do.
Yeah.
So that's how I thought it was interesting. But I did think that she was trying to like make like if Rufus could somehow take up some of Kevin's traits and that she somehow brought that out of Rufus, then I think she thinks she was doing a good thing.
Yeah, I think that I'm glad you brought that up because it seemed like Butler was kind of playing with this idea of this magical Negro, trope where, you have this black woman who comes in and saves the day and swoops in and changes and saves humanity. And ultimately her efforts do fail, right? And Dana is delusional. But I also wonder how that points to, we see in this present moment, especially after the election, that going around on social media, people are telling black women, take your rest, like go ahead and rest, don't do anything, right? And so I wonder in what ways has this magical Negro trope for the black woman followed us into present day America? You may not have an answer for that, but that's just something that I thought about.
I think I think that us always having to, in my mind, always having to do more with little, and always having to rise to the occasion when others around us fail to do so.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was evident within her, within what was happening for her.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody else want to jump in?
That was okay. First off, my name is Arnacy. I go by Cece. Hi.
Hey.
So I was screaming the entire time. I did not want Dana to do all of the things that she was doing. She was doing too much, trying to save Rufus, trying to turn him around, trying to save Kevin, trying to turn him around. Like it was way too much going on. And it kind of made me angry for a bit because, like you said, going back to present day, how black women always have to hold the torch for everybody. And it burned me up. It really did.
Yeah, I think that, and I don't know if I said this in last class, but I want to say it if I did not. When we're thinking about these caricatures of black women throughout history, well, first we have to look back to the Jim Crow era where some of these caricatures were kind of circulated through media. And by caricatures, I mean a lot of the black stereotypes that black folks still struggle with today, like the mammy figure, and this is this asexual large black woman. So if you want to think about someone masquerading as a mammy, you can think about Medea from Tyler Perry, or you have this Sapphire. This is the loud talking black woman who always has this attitude. The Jezebel caricature, who is this woman who's hypersexualized, and that is for black women. But one thing that, and of course you have the black man, the lazy black man, which is the Sambo and all these other, the Coon and all these other ones. But the point of me bringing up the caricatures is because when we think about Dana, right, and her, or even today, black women's tendency to try to save, I want to bring up another caricature that kind of got its roots in the 1960s to push back against the mammy, the Sapphire, and the Jezebel, which was the strong black woman. So this idea of this strong black woman was created within the black community to kind of push against those other caricatures that started cropping up in Jim Crow to demonize black people. And so once they try to kind of course correct, right, what it seems, they create this other archetype or this other black woman character, which is this strong black woman who struggles with this strength and what scholars have called the dis-ease called strength, more specifically Trudy Harris. But it causes a dis-ease, not just disease, right, disease within your body, but also dis-ease. And so we see Dana taking on this strong black woman role, right? This Captain Save-A-Hoe cape, if we want to say that. But we're also still seeing that in culture today. And so I saw someone in the chat say, can Black women rest? Because look at Hillman Talk. I don't think I'm part of Hillman Talk. I was already looking for a way to share my Butler work since I am out of academia. And so it just coincided with, what I was already doing on my Butler work. And so I don't know, in regards to Hillman Talk, I don't know the motivations for creators. I know how it got started. I did see that viral video, but I don't know the motivations for professor or Black women professors, more specifically, why they're doing it, right? Because it is an optional thing, right? So I don't know. I just wanted to bring that up because I did see someone put that in the chat. Okay. Anybody else want to tell me your thoughts about the book?
I have a thought about Alice and Dana. But first, my name is Imani.
Hey, Money.
Coming from New York City. So much of the book and so much of our discussion is about like Dana's relationship with men, Rufus and Kevin. But one of the things I was thinking about is that Dana has like this unique opportunity to talk to like one of her ancestors in Alice. And I think about how now, like in present day, we talk so much about how like I am my ancestors' wildest dream. But like Alice does not think that Dana is living the life that she should live. Alice is like, you should be trying everything you should to be free. Like you are willingly being enslaved. And as we see in the end of the book, Alice would rather die than be enslaved. And I just thought about how that was so interesting because Dana feels like she's doing everything or a lot of things to keep her bloodline alive, basically, and is doing what she needs to do to stay safe so that she can get back to her present day and to her life. But Alice doesn't have that context. And so, I think often like our ancestors would not have the context of our current day situation. And there are a lot of things that they would not like be proud of that we are doing, but that's okay because we're in a different time with different motivations, with different contexts. And so it just put this idea of like, my ancestors' greatest dream into like, or rather like it's dispelling that fallacy, but it doesn't divorce us from our ancestors. It just makes them like more human to us.
So I'm wondering, with that, in that vein, do you think Alice was ashamed of Dana?
I think because we see that there's that scene too where Rufus tells Dana that Alice did think good things about Dana. I think she said something like that she was smart or like she was really gonna get like achieve what she needed to. And I think that it was that type of relationship, you have with your elders who are like always complaining about things that you do, but in private they're like, yeah, that's my girl, like, she's doing her thing. But they only have like quote unquote negative things to say to you because they want you to be better.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of like the relationship that they have where like Alice is like, you could be doing more, you could be better. But to Rufus, she's like, yeah, that's my girl.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, right? It's kind of like this masking, this duality that's happening that I think you're starting to reference. It's Tiff. Can you put your phone on mute for me? But you're referencing this masking that Alice is doing, but I'm also thinking back to their conversations in private where, as you referenced that we say, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. And then now Dana has come face to face with her ancestor and she's not Alice's wildest dream. Alice seems to be disgusted with her. Dana is always clear that she doesn't have the endurance that, her ancestors had, even though she has the education, even though she is free. It seems like Alice, as an enslaved woman now, had more, or even before she was enslaved, right, to stand up to Rufus, to not allow him to to assault her in the ways that he did, it seems that Dana is more willing to be complicit or kind of go along to get along than Alice was. And so I'm always wondering, as Black people or descendants of the enslaved, how true is it that we are our ancestors' wildest dreams? What actions kind of point to those things other than us, being educated and things like that? This is not an answer question for you. This is just me throwing that out there because that's just what it made me think about.
I think the lines were kind of murky in that, because I know the specific part when Alice was caring for Margaret, and not Alice, Dana was caring for Margaret, and Alice was upset in that. And I understand Dana when it comes to, like, I have to do this in order for the bloodline to be continued. However, like, I'm doing something that's humiliating me. And as Black people, we always have to, like, toe that line. Like, in our everyday, day to day, we always have to go back and forth and go, I don't like the conditions that we're in right now, but I have to do what's able to make sure that my kids are okay, that my family's okay, that everybody else is okay.
So I'm wondering, do you see this in Black culture as a whole or educated Black folks?
As a whole.
Okay.
I see us, like, always having to, like you said, live that duality where you don't want this for us, but you have to do what's able in order to make sure everybody's okay. And some people, are upset, and me included, that we have to do it, but you have to see that it has to be done to a certain extent. Like, it's weird to call.
So so now I have before I have my larger question, does anyone else want to go? Because we can go around and around and around on this.
Hey, I'm Christine.
Hey, Christine.
Total English nerd, but first time reading Butler. Don't know how my teachers screwed up that one. But I loved this book. And one of the things that when I was listening to everyone, I thought about was when we're talking about Black women being able to rest, I thought it was such a stark expression of vulnerability when Dana cut herself to be able to go back home, because it was like harming yourself in the process of trying to rest for a moment because she just could not take that situation anymore. And like, that feels like sometimes you just like push yourself past the point of burnout, past the point of taking care of yourself before you're like, oh, wow, we are really needing to slow down here. And also that duality piece, it really hit me when Alice was talking about how they're like two halves, and like Dana was like kind of like the brains of the operation almost in the like emotional relationship with Rufus, even though Rufus was like in love sexually with Alice. Like she felt like Dana was occupying that like more romantic area, even though Dana didn't have any of those feelings. And I don't know, it just broke my heart to see how much effort was put into Rufus and how little was put into Alice. It just felt so patriarchal, and I was just like, Alice deserves so much better.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have a problem with the way Dana treated Alice, right? Because she was just seen as another commodity to me, reading Dana's actions towards her, when she sends her in there to sleep with Rufus, right? She's like, yeah, you got options, but I'm in here to coerce you to go and to do this thing, right? And she does not get the same care that Dana gives Rufus. And I don't know why that is. And I don't know why Butler, wrote it that way. But Alice does need justice. Justice for Alice. # justice for Alice. Right?
Absolutely. Because like that poor girl, like I would let my bloodline die if I was going to like put someone in a negative situation of like being sexually assaulted on the regular. I would be like, whatever, it's fine. My bloodline doesn't need to exist personally. but I got too much emotional back.
I don't know.
It's easier said than done, though.
It's definitely, and I think that is the genius of the book, right? We are always saying what I would do. You don't know. If we got beam me up Scotty to 1800s right now, I don't know what I would do. I would be shook, right? Because as we saw in the text, education means nothing. Education will fail you. You can be, what did he say? Tom Whalen say, an educated ninja does not mean a smart ninja. There's a difference there. So a lot of people are educated, but they're not smart. And so we have to kind of contend with that. But anyone else want to go before we get into the discussion? Okay.
I'll go real quick.
Okay.
In the fridge, whatever's
It's hold on one second. It's Tiffy.
I don't.
Hold on.
Look, you can get canned vegetables. We get like green beans and.
I just turned off her microphone. Okay, go ahead.
Who are you calling on?
You.
Me? Okay. Elizabeth, California. So one of the just themes that strikes me over and over again is that Black folks and white folks in America are part of each other. And I guess this will partly go into your question about home and homelessness. But the way that Sarah, who we know is a light-skinned woman, the Black kids and the white kids call her Aunt Sarah, right? And again, this way that the Redheads, both the mom and Rufus are redheads, and she keeps talking about that red hair over and over again. It's this thing that makes them stand out as apart. Mm-hmm. And in a kind of a way, and I tagged you on something that Tressie has posted about how redheads over history have been cast as outsiders, and in some way that can sort of correlate with black people being able to relate to that, but just her way that she feels at home, and the way that she also is just, there's this continual sort of gaslighting effect of was it really that long ago or was it not? You know, the whole time traveling thing is just, it reminds me that, yeah, slavery was not that long ago, and it is still a part of us. And it affects white people and Black people to this day. There's still a lot of sort of trauma that we see happening because of that.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, thank you for that. I think that when I'm thinking about Sarah and the fact that they call her aunt, I don't know if you caught the reference that was just a polite way of referring to her as the mammy character, right? The woman who was responsible for caring for the white family, cooking for them. And so it was this honor, allegedly, honor title, but not really. She was still a slave and she was still a mammy figure. But something that you said reminded me about Margaret Whalen, and it wasn't her hair. It was the fact that Margaret was, if I'm not mistaken, a lower class white woman. Here's why I'm bringing that up. There is this study in academia when mainly people who study Southern cultures, there's this thing called white trash culture. I'm not saying anyone is white trash, but I'm saying that there is a sect of academia that people study white trash. And if you want to think about a present day representation of white trash studies on film, think about if anyone has ever seen the Ozarks, right? If you've seen the Ozark, the film, I mean, the series, and you know Ruth, her family would be considered this white trash people. And the reason why I bring this up is because think about how Margaret would treat Black folks on the plantation. There were a spectrum to the ways in which white mistresses treated Black people. But what is historically true is more times than not, the lower class white women who married into more wealthier families would treat Black people the worst, not just because their husbands were sleeping with them, but because the only thing that they had over these Black people was the color of their skin. And so when you're looking at white trash studies and you're looking at the kind of people that are characterized within these studies, you would see a lot of what Margaret Whalen was doing and the things that she was saying and the way that she was acting. It bleeds over into other narratives. So that just triggered a thought. I wanted to throw that out there if anyone is interested in looking into those types of studies. It is a whole academic thing. Okay, anybody else want to go before we go?
Yeah, really quickly, I'll jump in because I just remembered. Oh, yeah, my name's Elisa, by the way. At the very end, was it Nigel that protected Dana? Like that he was the one that set the fire to cover up like how Rufus ended up dying. I was like, I thought it was so sweet how like in the very end, Nigel protected her and how they just had her back at the end.
Mm-hmm.
That was cute.
I want to hear y'all thoughts about Rufus. No justice, no sympathy for Rufus, or
Yeah, at the end, I mean, like she kept saying, she kept protecting Rufus a lot, but when it come with one-on-one time with Alice or even Sarah, she tried to like almost like shit talk Rufus, but they didn't want to give in. But behind his back, she could shit talk him, but in front of his face, like she couldn't do that. And at the very end, like her last breaking point when like before she ended up killing him, like that was her moment of realization, being like, he is just she quotes a man of his time, and well, in that moment finally decided not to forgive Rufus, and that was like the breaking point of I can't defend this man any longer and I have to finally put myself first, and then ends up losing her arm at the end.
Mm-hmm. And I think I'm laughing because the chat is saying absolutely not. We're not forgiving Rufus. Like no one has compassion for him. But one thing I want to remind you, he's in his like early 20s, right? When he dies, if I'm not mistaken. And so we have,
I was just gonna say Rufus is not. People were saying like he's a man of his time. No, Rufus was just a horrible person. I mean, he was very very selfish. He was selfish about even wanting to be Dana's friend when he was a child and what he could and could not do. He was exceptionally selfish. I mean, with Alice was a free woman. He had no rights to her. He literally had no rights to her at all.
I agree.
But he did everything within his power to have her because she reminded him of Dana. Mm-hmm. He in his mind, he was like, he said it, there are two women, but it's just one, because it reminded him of something that he could keep. He couldn't keep Dana with him, but he could keep Alice, even though she was a free woman. Mm-hmm. The fact that he went after her like that and then did all of the stuff he did and then got to a point when he was like, she's going to eventually love me. And at the end of it, I think Alice suffered from some Stockholm syndrome there. Because what else did she have? She had nothing else. Mm-hmm. So I just think that he had other options. And part of talking about Kevin was Kevin talking about like the things that he did. There were white Southern people who bought slaves and then set them free and do all kinds of stuff or whatever. He didn't do any of that. He was like, he had to be coerced, begged to. Like everything had to be, if I give an inch, you're going to give me a mile. So he was not redeemable.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yes. Hello. At all. Like the man was disgusting. And his possessiveness unnerved me because of how he treated everybody as objects or things to have instead of treating them like real people. And you can say it's a product of the time, but I can't give him that pass. Okay. I just can't.
Okay.
And it's the way that the enabling backfired on her. Like really thought that she could change him and tried and tried and tried. And in doing so, he became so attached to Dana that then he was afraid that he would lose her by like signing a will and freeing additional people. So it was like everything that she was trying to do to protect everyone else was just leading to all of these additional cords of energy tied to everyone that were preventing him from improving.
So do we think Dana is complicit?
I don't think Dana's complicit. Hi, I'm Ebony. I'm new to the panel.
Hey.
I don't think Dana is complicit. I think Dana is trying to exercise self-preservation. When I look at Kindred, and not just look at Kindred as a standalone, but as Octavia Butler's books, the way she writes, she's a sci-fi writer. So Kindred is using time travel. And really, when we look at Kindred, we're looking at her going back in time. So we're looking at time as not linear. We're looking at time as if she's going back, she's reverting backwards. And that's also called retrocausation. So she's trying to make sure that she is alive when the future comes. So that relationship between her and Rufus, and also her and Alice, is her just making sure that she will be born. Okay. And I know on the last live, somebody said, well, if you don't save him, you're already born, so what does it matter? But looking at Octavia Butler's book and that sci-fi aspect, who is to say the reason why Dana was not born then is that maybe another Dana was there during Rufus's time, making sure that he lived. And it's a cycle that continues.
I think that's
that it was always that future person that preserved the bloodline.
I think that's really fascinating to consider. I would probably have to think more about that, like if there was another Dana there. I don't know, because nothing in Butler's notes points to that. In fact, she's clear that Kindred is a work of fantasy, not science fiction, or even speculative fiction. And that's an academic argument, right? That only book that she really used science in is Survivor. And so then, we're talking about the speculative, but right now, Kindred is a work of fantasy. But one thing that I want to remind everyone is that Butler, even in her notes, she says that she's not writing about powerless people, and every character that she writes, every protagonist has a choice, right? And so I think we're giving Dana outs. I think we're being a little too soft. I think we're like, oh, she's just trying to save her life. I hear that, but the same logic can be used about everybody else in the book. I think we're a little bit too soft on the modern day girl.
Did Dana feel like she had a choice?
I think she knew that she was kidding herself at times. When Rufus wanted her to give up the book and the map, she talks about how she wanted the easy way out, and she was trying to convince herself that it was just a symbol. So she what did she say? She said, yeah, I told myself the map was more a symbol than a necessity anyway. I wanted to do things the easy way if I could. I wanted to stay here and let a letter go to Boston. So I think she knew she was kidding herself on some level at times.
I think that Dana has more agency than a lot of people in this text, and everyone has a choice. Choices are hard to make, but everyone does have a choice on what they decide to do or decide not to do. And I'm not trying to take anything away from the hardness of the choices that she had to make, or even her experiences. I'm just saying that it seems that we're a little bit softer on Dana because she's from the modern times than actually critically analyzing the things she did to Alice, right? We've talked about it or touched it briefly. Some of the things or the thoughts she had towards Aunt Sarah, her critiques of the South. Like, she is I don't think she's likable to me. I don't like her. I'm just gonna say that, but I just think that we're a little bit too tough on her. And I think that we are justifying it through this lens of she's a woman of her time. She's from the 1970s. But if we give her that out, we have to give the same grace to Rufus.
I think that that Dana is the hero in her story where she's the villain. So I think that in this story or in this process, she has, like I told you before, she's arrogant. She comes back and she's like, I'm from the future, so you're not going to talk to me anyway. You're not going to use that word. I'm not going to look at the struggles of the like I'm not going to look at the struggles of any of the other enslaved. I'm basically in the house, but the people out in the field are different, and so I'm not low like that, or I'm able to read and write or whatever else. She put herself in a space where she wanted to be, as they called her, a white ninja, right? They kept calling her that. And she like owned that, and she knew it. She knew what she was asking Alice to do was despicable. But she was like, what choice do you have? He gonna take it anyway.
Yeah.
But she didn't go like, well, save yourself, or do like she didn't like, and she was like, well, if you're like easy, well, it won't be as bad, because in her mind, she used the excuse that Hagar had to be born. So once Hagar was born, she really didn't have anything else to do. Like at that point, she could have just said, okay, the next time he calls, I'm just gonna watch him. I'm not going to do anything. But she could not she had to be the hero. And I think that because of that, her actions and her viewpoints are all slanted. So it never comes off, because she can't accept the fact that, oh my God, I'm a co-conspirator in rape. I'm a co-conspirator in terms of teaching a child to read, when you know what that could mean. You know what that could mean, and being blatant about it. Because she wasn't really sneaking around. I mean, she was just like, it wasn't someplace off far where nobody could find and do some stuff like that. She was careless.
Yeah.
So I just think that there's a lot of where she wanted to make herself for lack of a better term, the white savior of this black drama. Like this thing that's happening. So it's not that I don't dislike Dana, but she had to go through too much delusion for me in order to get to the point where you're really standing up. Like she wanted one foot in and one foot out.
I think Dana definitely had a lot of.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I think Dana definitely had a lot of plot armor, and that armor came from her proximity to the white men around her.
Okay.
Yep.
So that allowed her to be a slave, but a very protected slave. And we saw that when one of the slave men showed even a little bit of interest in her, Rufus quickly sold him.
Yeah. 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 Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just really quickly wanted to say that I think Butler, in a way, manufactures us being irritated with Dana from the position she has coming from the future, because they don't really show a lot or much of any experiences where Dana is experiencing racism in the 70s, which still existed. It exists now. It was better, but it wasn't nothing, but because she didn't, I don't know, you don't see any sort of racial struggle that she's experiencing then. It's easier to see her in that like perspective of protection a little bit more.
Okay. Was somebody else want to? Okay. So one thing Miss Tina, I think, said, she mentioned Dana was slanted, right? She's in this slanted room. And it reminded me of this book by Melissa Harris Perry called Sister Citizen: Shame, Stereotypes, and Black Women in America. And she basically has this chapter about how Black women are in this slanted room. Same phrase that you use. And they know they're in a slanted room. But no matter how much they know, they still try to stand upright in the slanted room. They still try to course correct, knowing that they're already standing upright. But because the room around them is slanted, they try to adjust to accommodate said room. And I thought that was interesting that you mentioned that, because this is what Dana is attempting to do. She is a privileged slave. She is a slave. She is a slave, but she also knows she can go home, right? And I think that even thinking about Kevin, I know we gave him a hard time last week, but he even tells her at the end of the book, stop covering for him, Rufus, right? Stop making excuses for this white man that you love, right? And even in Butler's notes, I think I shared this on the Substack. These are two white men that she loves. She loves Rufus and she loves Kevin. Or maybe I didn't share that and I'm going to share it tonight. I don't know. But she loves these two white men, but she has to figure out how not to be owned by them. But she's already, in a sense, owned by Kevin through marriage. And I say that owned loosely. And the reason why I use that word loosely and strategically is because there's a point in the novel when Kevin is back in the 1970s and he tells her to do something. Butler writes that Dana obeyed. And I don't think that word saying obeyed, I don't think that that was by happenstance or she didn't mean to write that. That was a very deliberate thing, right? And so she has come under some type of ownership of her white husband, but also she is under the real ownership of her white ancestor slave master. And I think that, I mean, she's a complex character, but I just don't think she's a savior. I don't think she's a hero. That's all I'm saying. Okay, y'all, let's get to the questions because we'll be going all the way around. Let's get to the questions. Let's talk about cracking the facade of white racial innocence. If you all want to follow along with the questions, they are on the Substack. And I'm just reading right off the Substack because we're finna run out of time. All right. It says, throughout Kindred, Kevin is portrayed as an innocent white man, yet his character is far from an ideal representation of goodness. His marriage to Dana, while complex in the past, carries subtle hesitations that Butler never explicitly states. Considering Dana's fear of Kevin being trapped in the past and his familial ties to a racist sister, do you believe Kevin truly struggles to understand the brutality of slavery, or are we witnessing cracks in the concept of white racial innocence? Dream, the Substack is right in the link in my bio. The question asks, do we believe that Kevin truly struggles to understand the brutality of slavery? And this is, of course, after he spent 5 years there. Or are we witnessing cracks in the concept of white racial innocence?
I think yes, and only because it wasn't easy, but it was easy for him to kind of slide back into his whiteness when he got back home. Like he's just a bystander at this point. Like he's been through the 5-year struggle and all that, but he doesn't really get it completely, to me.
Okay, everyone is saying cracks in the chat. What y'all think, panelists?
I think we saw this a couple times. One of the times was when Dana explained that she saw a beating happen. Mm-hmm. And, Kevin was not a witness to that. Mm-hmm. So he had to be filled it was always like Kevin's a step behind, except for when the children, they were playing an auction game where slaves were being sold. Mm-hmm. And he didn't think it was as big of a deal as Dana did. It didn't impact him. So I think that he was once removed from the experience.
But what do you think about the part in the narrative where he tells Dana that he literally saw a slave master whip the child out of a pregnant woman? Like she was strung up, she was getting whipped, and the child just fell to the ground out of her body.
That was after, he had the 5 years and he was left behind. Yeah. And I think when he finally came to the present with that PTSD, that was when he had time to really see slavery for what it was. And it seemed like that was Kevin's redemption arc. Okay. He kind of changed after that experience, being left behind.
I'll give you that. Okay. Anybody else?
I agree, that there was definitely some growth after that 5-year period, because I felt like before that he had a lot of trouble recognizing the brutality of the past without reconciling with the current of who he is and any flaws that he might currently have with himself. Because there's that white fragility, that fear of acknowledging that any of that could apply to you. And it wasn't until I guess being stuck back there for 5 years really just makes you oh wow. And I think probably spending time with the abolition movement, I'm if it's anything like some of the leftist movements that happen now, there are probably a lot of people that gave him some very firm talkings to back then that changed his perspective also.
Yeah. So I saw in the chat that some people were saying but he saw the whipping and he didn't do anything. This is not me I'm not on the Kevin stand, right? I'm not running the stand account. But I want to remind you that if it was kind of frowned upon to be a black sympathizer, right? And so while he could have done something in his whiteness, if he was pegged as a sympathizer, your punishment was excommunication from the white race, right? So you lose your privilege. And I'm not saying that, I'm not making an excuse for him, but I am saying that to openly be a sympathizer was a dangerous thing, right? Because they will then turn on you and you would become like similar to the enslaved. The only thing that's saving you is your skin color. And for the longest, of course, you can beat property. You cannot beat another human being. And we know that until the 3/5 compromise that didn't even give black folks full human status, they were still seen as subhuman, right? So I just want to remind people that.
They whipped Rufus, though.
I didn't hear you.
Rufus got whipped as a little boy.
Yeah. Okay. So, I don't think children punishment or course correcting, we want to call it that, will be considered the same as beating black folks.
Yeah, but I just thought it was interesting that he was whipped and he had the scars on his back. I don't know. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that his father whipped him with the same cowhide that he whipped black folks with. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing with Kevin, in terms of whether or not he was innocent of cracks, I think that Kevin learned, like he observed, he saw, he understood a little bit better. But it's, to me, the same thing as a male doctor talking to someone about giving birth. I think you know what that's like in terms of like you've been there, you've helped to deliver, but you haven't been through that pain. You haven't been through that process of having, a baby in your body. You haven't been through all of it. So you could observe, and I think that you could kind of see it to a certain extent, but I don't think that you ever understand the depths of what that does to you. Because no matter what with Kevin, like, he left. Like, he did not say, well, I'm gonna stick around. I mean, she implied that he left because he was becoming, people were looking at him sideways because he was doing, helping to free from an underground situation. But he basically picked up and moved north to try to better his situation. Now, he never knew when she was gonna come back. And it wasn't like there was the internet or even phones or anything else for him to come back. So he knew by leaving that space, he didn't have to go as far as he did. He went pretty far, trying to make a new life. So I just think that he understood. I think he sympathized. I think that he tried to do what he thought he could do, but I don't think that he was like, I get it 100%. I just don't.
I'm wondering how the role of epigenetics in this conversation, right? Because we do understand that trauma is passed down genetically. And if your great 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 grandmother was whipped and expressed that trauma in her body, then that gene expression then morphs to express it in the next generation, and it just carries down. And so I know that because of how epigenetic research functions or works, Black folks will always be the most intimate understanders of enslavement because it is passed down through our bodies, right? Through the bloodline. I don't think that it will transfer. I mean, you can empathize, but I don't think that Kevin would ever have the understanding, because the understanding that we have is largely genetic understanding. It's something that our genes express through our bodies, and we have these visceral reactions, even if we're not the ones being touched. Even if you don't see it, if you hear it, you have a bodily response, right? So I'm wondering about the role of epigenetics and, in that.
I think Butler expressed epigenetics through the visual of Dana losing her arm. That was symbolic of the epigenetics that we as descendants of slaves connect with our ancestors.
Yeah. Kate Stake, did you want to say something?
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in. I can't really speak to the epigenetics piece of things, but I kind of disagree that Kevin had growth, because I think that when they were back in the present, like on page 244 and 245 in my edition, Kevin is kind of harping on Dana, like someday you're gonna have to stop dragging around that bag with you. And I wonder if you're not eager to go back to Maryland, and kind of was like, I'll excuse you if you've been raped. And so I just don't think that he has a tremendous amount of growth, and I think that he's very stuck in his white male point of view, to the point of like, and I don't think that he's learned to empathize, and I don't think he's grown. I think he went back to when he was stuck in the past. I think he did some things that he thought he should do on paper, and then once that was over, and that was that.
Okay. Anybody else before we move on? Okay. Question 2, education and survival. Dana reflects, education didn't mean smart. He had a point, and this is what Tom Whalen said to her. Nothing in my education or knowledge of the future had helped me escape. Reflecting on your own understanding of slavery, how does this statement challenge modern perceptions of education and its utility in overcoming systemic oppression? I'll read it again. The question is referring to it's really dismantling the belief that education will always save you. And so the quote, or the thing that Tom Whalen says to Dana is, you are educated, but you're not smart. And she says he has a point, and she agrees that nothing in her education or knowledge of the future has helped her escape. So she's an educated Black woman going back to the South. She knows about Black history, Black culture. She knows about slavery, but nothing helped her escape. So the question is, reflecting on your own understanding of slavery, how does this statement challenge modern perceptions of education and its utility in overcoming systemic oppression? Ultimately, will education save us?
I think this was Butler's way of telling us, the reader, that may possibly be an educated person or an educated Black person, that just because you say, oh, I would do this, that, and the third if it was me, oh, I'm not my ancestors, you never know how you're going to react if that was really your lived experience. And just because we are educated now and we're looking in hindsight saying, well, I would have done things this way or that way, that's not necessarily how things would have played out.
Yeah. And I think that we can even, when we're thinking about the economic crash of 2008, if I'm not mistaken, or even this pending crash that's about to happen, the people who were jumping off the roofs and unaliving themselves were high up in finance, right? They were the educated, they were the elite. The poor people, the people who learned how to survive, were not the ones jumping out of buildings, right? Arguably, it was the educated. It was the upper echelon of society that could not survive. Now we have a Black woman who knows about enslavement. I know a lot about Black history, but I cannot say that if I'm snatched back to the South, that I would know what to do. I wouldn't, right? And I think that she's exposing like the cracks in education. Like, you build your house on this idea. And let me give y'all an example. This is a real life example, and I'm gonna tell y'all this story and I'm gonna let somebody else go. When I was in graduate school, I taught in a maximum security men's prison. I taught African American literature as part of the Alabama Prison Arts and Education program. And I am third year graduate student, PhD student. And, I'm in Alabama, and the prison is right outside of Birmingham. So you have to exit the main roads and you have to go through the back roads. And if anybody knows about the South and the back roads, you go in through sundown towns. Now, my class was at 8 a.m., so I didn't have to go through any sundown town at night. My breath is picking up because it's a very scary experience. Anyway, I get off the main highway, you go through the back roads, you lose cell service immediately. So I'm driving here, I'm going through this town called Hueytown. What you would see in this town are shanty houses, Confederate flags, all of the markers that you don't want to be a Black person in this space. But I am doing my civic duty to go to teach at the prison, right? And so this is around the time that the Sandra Bland incident had just happened. So I'm driving. I'm driving a white Ford Focus. I still have my Illinois license plates on my car and I'm driving to this prison and I automatically get stopped. I get stopped by the police. They pull up on me, right? One police officer. Okay, I'm not sure what's going on. I pull over and then a second car pulls up right behind me, police officer. So these two officers get out of the car. It's just me. I have, you're not supposed to make yourself attractive to go into the prison. So I have oversized clothes on. I don't have on any makeup. My hair is braided to the back, kind of like Sealy braids in a way, because they tell you don't make yourself attractive because you're going into a men's facility. So I'm doing my best. Anyway, they come up to my car and the first thing that the police officer asks me is, "What are you doing here?" I'm educated. I am at the flagship university and I'm working on a PhD and I'm going to do my civic duty to teach in prison. And he asked me, what are you doing here? And ultimately saying, what is your Black body doing here? And that's the first time that I had to account for why my Black body was in a white space. Now, why am I telling you this? Because I believed at the time that if I did the right thing, if I got the education, if I stayed out of trouble, certain things will never happen to me, right? And so I'm shook. I can't call nobody if something's happened. I am terrified. And so he's like, okay, give me and I tell him I'm headed to this prison. I'm going to teach. And let me say this, coming from the South Side of Chicago, y'all, my mama never have to have a conversation with me about police. She always had it with my brothers. I have big Black brothers. They're younger brothers, but they're large. They're big men. Anyway, so she never had to have a conversation about my body in reference to the police. So now I am being asked by two white male police officers, what are you doing here? So I said, I'm headed to the prison. I'm going to teach. He's like, okay, give me your license. Give him my license. He comes back. It's like, your plates are not coming back registered. And I'm like, I don't know what you mean because I've had this car for 5 years now. These are the plates. So he's like, okay, sit tight. We're going to run it again. He runs it again and he's like, nothing's still coming up. I am shaking at this point because you've already asked me, what am I doing here? So you already let me know that I'm not welcome in this place. And then he sees my parking decal in my window from the university. And he said, are you a student? I said, well, yeah. And he says, well, let me see your student ID. So I happened to give this man 2 forms of ID. I already gave him my insurance, my license. I didn't give him everything he wanted. He asked for my student ID and he says, we're going to let you go. But he says, are you going to be coming this way often? And I'm like, yes, sir. Every Monday morning, I am coming to this prison to teach for, I don't remember how many more weeks I had left. And he says, okay, we'll keep an eye out for you. And then he asks, do you need an escort? And I said, I don't know. Do I need an escort? Right? Do I need someone to escort me? Like, am I in danger here? Why am I telling you this? Because I believed that if I was educated, if I did the right thing, if I presented a certain way, that certain things will never happen to me. And they did. And this is right after the Sandra Bland situation. And I have no cellular service and I'm driving to the prison in tears. And then when I get to the prison, I'm already disheveled. I'm going in there and there's this white prison guard there. And she says, tell him this girl is here. Girl, I'm like 26 at this point. Tell them this girl is here to teach. Girl, let's not forget that, right? That is a very deliberate term to use. I'm probably more educated than this lady, but she's this white lady who has this authority on prison grounds that I don't have, who has this ability to, one, deny me access, but I just left an encounter with white men who had the ability to take my body from me. And by body, I mean, take me up out of here, do whatever they want to do. No one would have known. And so when I'm thinking about this question, that day, no one could have prepared me for that encounter, right? Education did not save me. And I had believed that it would have saved me. And then it shattered in the face of that experience, right? And so I had to tell you all that real life, experience that happened because it really changed my outlook on who gets to survive and who doesn't, who can thrive and who can't, and what lies that we have believed as educated people, and how they will fail us when a real life situation happens sometimes. So I know that was tough. Take a deep breath. So the question asks, how does this statement challenge modern perceptions of education and its utility in overcoming systemic oppression? Because education didn't help me that day.
It's funny that you talked about that because I was born and raised in Mississippi, and we're always, seen as uneducated, and why don't you fight back against, systemic racism, and why don't you do this and why don't you do that from, people in the North. And having you explain, like, yeah, that was the moment where I realized, like, my education did not fly here. Like, me having to explain that to people that aren't from Mississippi, that aren't from Louisiana, that aren't from Alabama is hard. It's really hard to kind of be like, yeah, no, like, these white people don't care, period, about what you have and what you've done and what you've gone through and stuff like that. You're seen as a black body at the end of the day. You're seen as just another number, just another person that's invading their space at that point.
Yeah, and when it comes to like education and protection, like I currently work in public health and Black maternal health specifically, and so we see this in the statistics all the time. A Black woman is more likely to experience a negative birth outcome than a Black woman who's college educated is more likely to experience a negative birth outcome than a high school educated white woman. And even, you look at people like Dr. Shalon Irving, she was like at the top of the CDC, literally as educated as you can be about birth. And she died during her birth. Preventable. They're all preventable. They're not all, but it's like over 80% of these are preventable. And it's like, we talk about it all the time in public health. Like, you cannot health educate yourself out of a bad outcome when it comes to racism.
And I think it's I was going to say, I think it's a lesson to learn between education and survival or street smarts. Because sometimes I think that we have been programmed to think it's just about what's in the book, right? I think what's in the book definitely helps us, but it also does not necessarily equate to survival skills or being smart enough to be able to navigate the environments and things around you. And so I'm a transplant. I'm from Chicago area. And like I said, I'm in the Atlanta area. And there is the culture shock between coming from Chicago and dealing with Chicago and then coming down here in Georgia on the outskirts of Atlanta and trying to do that, like you said, the education is not what gets it.
Yeah.
What I noticed is that because my mother was my parents were from the South, a lot of yes sir, yes ma'am, and being able to understand the just dealing with people differently here has helped me a lot. If I didn't have that, it would be even bigger struggle. So I just think that I think that right now, which would in the book in terms of the education versus awareness, I think that what Butler was trying to do was trying to say both of them are needed. You need to be able to do both. You have to be able to recognize contextual clues, cultural differences, the different roles that you play, how you affects what's going on around you, and then put that into play. So I feel like she had the education, but she also misused it. Like, why would you ever believe that he was going to let you keep a book of maps? Like, that's just
naive. She was naive.
Yeah, like, why would you? I mean, immediately take that book and put it on the shelf someplace. He ain't reading it.
Yeah.
You can go down to the library later and get it. I mean, it just felt like there was a lot of stuff like, and to me, that's a survival skill as opposed to a smart skill, as opposed to somebody being educated.
I think that in addressing the question of does education help tackle those systemic oppressions. It just reminds me of a phrase or a quote that I'm sure some people know about how I studied war so that my children could study science and mathematics, so that their children could study arts. And I think that education is important, but you have to study the right things and know which generation are you in. Is it the time for you to study law, to know that you are protected by law? Is it time for you to, become lawyers and police officers and judges? Or can we do art studies and be art majors? And I think that's where education should be focused. Of course, it's important. And like the other panelists said, they should go hand in hand. But the focus of education, what type of education do you have? Because in Dana's sense, just because she had very little medical knowledge, they came to rely on her medically. And she was bringing some of that future knowledge back with her, but she was by no means a healthcare professional. And when Tom Whalen had that heart attack, she could not bring him back.
Yeah.
And then she was actually punished for that.
Yeah.
So what type of education, I believe, is what's important to be able to dismantle some of the oppressive systems that are in place.
I like that. I get behind that. Anybody else want to go?
The only other thing that I was going to add is that, this idea that you could like educate out of in like an insidious system is flawed, I think. I think that was one of the things that really struck me in the book as a whole, is that it really drove home how big of an institution slavery was. And how even as educated as she was and as many things as she read, there were still moments that she got totally caught off guard by just the scope of this racist evil system. Like when she mentioned, like I think it was Rufus that said, like, what do you think will happen to all of my slaves if I die? And she hadn't even really considered at that point that would mean, everybody gets broken out. So I think that was one of the things that was kind of tied in with the education comment, is that you can't educate yourself out of an entirely like giant system this way.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Okay. Let's see where we at on time. Okay, since we got about 20 minutes, let's skip the dulling effects of slavery and let's go to possessive intimacy, because I think that, somebody jumped off, so let me pull somebody else up. The possessive intimacy question. And it says on page 151, Sarah refers to her former master as my man. Okay. A deliberate choice by Butler that reveals a complex and unsettling dynamic. This moment underscores the deeper, often coerced meanings of intimacy on the plantation between white men and black women. How does this statement reflect the blurred lines between power, possession, and survival in such relationships? And in what ways does Butler use the scene to challenge conventional understandings of intimacy, particularly in the context of enslavement? We're talking about possessive intimacy. One of the things that drew me to this question, or to even consider it, is in reading a lot of slave narratives and even neo-slave narratives. Hold on, let me pull somebody else up. In reading a lot of slave narratives and neo-slave narratives, we see some of these themes of this commingling between white men and black women is a little bit more than a slave master relationship. There is some type of intimacy that happens between them. And there is this term, possessive intimacy. It's an academic term. Because they are possessive. The men do own the women, but there is some type of intimacy. There's a maybe it's distorted, I don't know, but there is something deeper there. Some people say it's love. Some people say it's lust. Some people say it could be Stockholm syndrome, whatever we want to classify it as, that's fine. But I'm interested in the fact that Sarah, who is Aunt Sarah, Mammy Sarah, she had children by Miss Hannah's father, who is Miss Hannah is Tom Whalen's wife. So she had, if I'm not mistaken. No, Miss Hannah was Tom Whalen's wife before Margaret. Okay. And so Sarah calls this white man, my man, not my master, not my owner, but my man. And that's a very possessive term for her to say. Okay. So the question is, how does this statement reflect the blurred lines between power, possession, and survival in such relationships? And in what ways does Butler use this scene to challenge conventional understandings of intimacy, particularly in the context of enslavement?
I think that maybe Sarah kind of thought that she had more pull because she said something to Dana about kind of swaying Kevin while she was still young and pretty to set her free. And maybe Sarah thought she had, more power over quote unquote her man, but then it turned out that she did not. A lot of her children were sold. And then it also brings to mind Tess and how Tess was kind of passed through different men. Those men saw these women as property, and that's where that power struggle is. Because when Tom was no longer, I think it was Tom, was no longer using Tess, then the overseer got to use Tess, and then Tess ended up in the field, and then Tess was sold.
Yeah. But I'm curious, as a woman as old as Sarah, right? Who did not get, who was not freed upon her master's death, still referring to him as my man. That, I think that speaks. I don't think it's a survival thing, and I know you didn't say that. Someone in the chat said it. I don't think it's survival. I think that there is some deeper affection there, whether he freed her or not.
Yeah, it feels kind of like the power dynamic that can happen with like famous people versus a fan. Like it would never be appropriate for there to be a relationship there because there's always going to be that power dynamic that makes it never able to be consensual because that person has walk away power, whereas this person is so attached that it's just unhealthy and unrealistic. And I do think that this book demonstrates how intimacy can be a form of violence, but it can also be wielded to get more agency, and you have to decide kind of how you're going to live your life to put yourself in the best possible position.
I was thinking that maybe I guess the best way to describe it, or I was thinking about it like you have to have status. Okay. Sarah has status as a cook, but she also lost some of that status when her babies were sold away. That was a punishment that everybody knew about or whatever else. So being able to put myself in a situation that says or reminds individuals, my man, or that I have this status is a powerful tool given what they were going through. Because you had, like Tess was about to, she wanted to be in a certain position because she felt that's how she was going to be safe. And that's why she told on Dana or some other stuff. I just think that I don't think there could be intimacy in any of these relationships. I think there could be sex, and I think that there could be rape, and I think there could be violence. I think it could be that. But true intimacy is like, it's all about what I can get from you, or how does this sustain me or keep me moving up the ladder or prestige or survive. It's not intimacy in a way that we're thinking about, men and women today, because there is not that. There is no opportunity for that. Tom Whalen treated Margaret like crap. I mean, and she had no choice. Like, so there is no opportunity beyond that. So I think that Sarah is to me, she's a domestic violence part. She was in domestic violence situation, and you'd be like, yeah, that's my man. I know he's doing all of this stuff, but that elevates me. That gives me some power. That does this for me. I mean, I just think that's what that is. And so I don't think the word intimacy is valid. Period. In any of this.
Wait, before someone jumps in, before you jump in for Black girls, I just want to remind us not the cultural understanding of intimacy, but the definition is close familiarity or closeness. That is what intimacy by definition is. Closeness or familiarity. That word is defeating me right now. Yeah. So not in the way that we're thinking about intimacy modern, but by the textbook definition, closeness for
But
Black.
I don't think that they were. But I don't think they were close. I think that again, it's like you physically are close, but like again, like there is. I'm used to this. I got to do it.
I don't
What else
know.
is there?
But
I have no choice. In this case, I don't think so.
Okay.
Hi y'all. I'm new to the panel. Mariama, joining you from Kentucky. I think the intimacy or the possession, feelings of affection that Sarah has for her man mirror the affection that Dana has for Rufus this entire book. And they're not physically intimate, right, at all through this whole book.
Right.
But there's a level of closeness, and being kindred to each other that happens all through this book. And it's really not until the very, very end where he crosses that line, right? Where she's realizing that their closeness, the protection she thought she had because of her proximity to him, the power she thought she had, is not there at all. And so one of the questions that I just find myself asking is, and I think you posted this in a different Substack post, was that the title of this book was, I think, Possession, Guardian, right? And how that changes things. And then also, who is kindred here? Like, who are we talking about as kindred to one another? And I think that complicates the relationship between Dana and Rufus, between Dana and Alice, and what intimacy looks like, because she shares intimate moments with a lot of the characters in this book. But her connection and her wanting to protect or believe that Rufus can be good, can evade his circumstances, is a through line throughout. And I think what makes her such a compelling character and makes us really frustrated with her a lot of the time as well.
And I think that, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I don't think it's not just the Sarah and her man doubling. There's also the Rufus and Alice intimate relationship. And this is why I'm saying, I'm just saying it loosely, because even though Rufus was horrible, he loved her. He wanted her to want him, but she didn't. Right. And so there's a blurring there. With Sarah and her man, there's a blurring there. But Miss Tina mentioned status, and I need to say that when we're thinking about status of the enslaved, in a lot of slave narratives, we would often see the enslaved say that I have this master, and my master is better, right? And so the enslaved will start to kind of try to closely tie themselves to their master, because they felt that being close to whiteness gave them some type of status, even though they were still slaves. And we see that still today. But they would say that I have this master, and they would be so proud to be proud. I say that loosely, but they would be so proud to be owned by this particular master, because they felt that they gave them a status over other people who may have had lesser class masters. And so it's this like, let me say that I belong or attach to this person, because that would give me a particular type of status, right? And so when I'm thinking about my man from Sarah, she does not have that status on this plantation, right? Miss Hannah's gone. Tom has remarried. She is the handkerchief head, the asexual Black woman on this. She's not this sexual power. She doesn't have this sexual power anymore. And so I think maybe she could be casting herself back to this other time when she was seen as this beautiful woman who was desirable, who did have this sexual power. Because Black women on plantations did use their sexuality as power sometimes. Okay. What y'all think? What y'all got? Anybody else want to hop in? We still rejecting the intimacy part? Okay, y'all ready to move on? We got 10 minutes. Miss Tina, what you got?
I'm still rejecting intimacy. Sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay, it's okay. Okay, all right. Let's talk about the plantation as a central character. That's something that we don't often talk about in literature, the plantation as a character. The question says, in Kindred and other works by Black authors, the plantation often functions as more than a setting. It becomes a central character. Why do you think so much of Black identity in literature is shaped around the plantation, even for authors from different geographical regions? Is there value in continually revisiting and reevaluating Black movements and identity within the Southern landscape during slavery?
Short go. I gotta wear these little shorts.
Fika, put your phone on mute. Let me
These
turn
are
it
so freaking cute.
I'm gonna put it on fire. Okay. What we think, y'all, the plantation as a central character, do we think first of all, why do we think so much of Black identity in literature is shaped around the plantation, even if authors are not from the South? Let's start with that question.
I think they've kind of turned the plantation into a caricature,
Okay, say more.
physical person.
Okay. Say more if you can.
I think that even Butler and all the other authors try to make the plantation, try to explain it and maybe give it a personality, for people to a complexity, a depth, so that people can wrap their mind around it, so they can see, both the positive and negatives, kind of like what she did with Rufus's character, trying to give more of a 360 view of what a plantation was. Yes, there were children that were playing auction like it was slave, but then there was also people in the cookhouse working together, making a good meal, making meals out of scraps.
Okay.
I think it's a way of showing and not telling, specifically in writing too. So making your setting an experience that your readers can feel and smell and taste and hear. And I'm thinking about the fact that I'm still, honestly, my mind is blown about the idea that we spend more time in the past in this book than we do in the 1970s.
Yeah.
And what that means as far as imagination and fantasy, and what the imaginations of those that were enslaved could have possibly predicted or seen in the future. But I think that the setting in Kindred becoming a character allows those of us who maybe are not able to see and smell and taste and hear this to be in it a little bit more. And I can't tell you really one detail about her house in the 1970s, right? Except for, her arm, the image of her arm getting stuck in the walls. But I can feel the darkness of her, that first time she goes back running through the woods trying to find the cabin, right? I can feel her exhaustion in the fields when she's there for one day. I had a visceral reaction to when she cut herself, and then went back to the present time. So I think that it is a technique or a tool for being able to maybe give a reader a glimpse and a visceral feeling of what it might have felt like to be in that moment and time and place.
Butler as an author is very good at world building. A lot of her books she makes a whole world for you to experience. And I think that this book is no different. She definitely created that world for us on the plantation, standing next to her.
Yeah, because she was a great researcher and storyteller, right? But I'm wondering, for Black authors and scholars, like, it seems that this is the point where we start, right? I guess I'm wondering, why do so many Black authors feel the need to confront the plantation? Like, is this the grounding moment? Is this the point where we see Black identity begin and form in America?
I think that it's a point where from a cultural, social situation, it's like living on the plantation. Because if you think about the structure that it is, the government, the way that is run, what ends up happening to that, it's the institution that a lot of our our black institutions are based off of. It's structured around the same thing. So a lot of the habits that we have culturally, a lot of the things that we eat or do or whatever else, it comes from that. And so when you talk about the plantation and you see the big house, you see the columns, you see these small situations, it's all familiar. We are you know, hundreds of years away from quote unquote the plantation, but it's still very prevalent and very real.
Sure.
And you
Yeah.
see it. You can look at something and there are some houses you look at and you just like feel like, okay, I don't want to go there, or I don't want to do that, or this just doesn't feel like it's right. Like you talked about driving through this place with no cell service and being by yourself or whatever else. My husband and I, we went to South Carolina and we were driving, and I kept thinking like how many in my head was like how many people escaped from this?
Mm-hmm.
How many people, like, you going through this country and it's beautiful. I mean, it's absolutely stunning and beautiful, but you're like, how much blood is on these ground and the soil. So I think the plantation as an institution becomes alive because it is a touchstone. Even if we think about it, not necessarily literally, but it's a touchstone that everything around us kind of works. Like we understand it, like you said, like through your genes, like you get it. You get what that is.
Okay.
Genesis.
Hmm?
It's the Genesis. It's African American Genesis. So it's
Yes.
kind of somewhere where she had to touch to show this is where it began.
Okay.
Yeah, I think like everyone is kind of saying in the comments and on the panel, if you are a descendant of enslaved people,
Mm-hmm.
if we don't have anything else in common, we know if we try to trace back our roots, where are we ultimately going to end up at?
Mm-hmm.
Because the chances of us saying, okay, like if we're lucky enough to be able to get that far back, right? Because
Oh no.
back, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, so if we're lucky enough to be able to get that far back, if we have the records available to get that far back, that is monumental in itself. You know what I'm saying? But like for us to have the opportunity to say, oh, and then I can also trace back to what part of Africa that I'm from. Like that is a foreign concept to many of us. Like the chances of that happening,
Mm-hmm.
no.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we're all kind of agreeing that this is the point, right? All lines come back to this moment because this is our introduction to the Americas. This is where Black life in America arguably has turned or begun, right? After the Middle Passage. And so I guess for Black writers, they feel that since this was the beginning, we have to confront this beginning because we have to know where we came from in order to know where we're going. One of the frustrations, though, that I have with neo-slave narratives, and I do kind of consider Butler's work as a neo-slave narrative, is that they are kind of the forerunners to the Afrofuturist movement. And any neo-slave narrative is really just a reimagining of the plantation or enslavement. But I don't think a lot of reimagining happens. And I wonder, is that just like, I don't know, like authors' inability to go beyond material fact? Or is there no real power?
Can you explain neo-slave?
Yeah, so it is really like you want me to explain the genre? It is basically authors reimagining life on the plantation and rewriting characters to kind of just reimagine what Black life could have been. So new slave narrative, neo slave narrative.
Okay.
Yeah. And so
I'm sorry. I was doing research on my family line, ancestry stuff, and I found a slave schedule. So I went back to my goal was to find all of my ancestors who were born in slavery, the last people who were enslaved, and the first people who were free. And in one line, I was able to go even further back. And so one of the things I found was the slave schedule. It sent me out for about a month. I could not, just the idea of like seeing something with a check mark, a little line, dash, and thinking this is my ancestor with no other proof than that, it just does something to you. It did something to me. And so with the plantation, when I think about it now, or when I think about like that whole structure, that the whole thing's about like the inventory, and that you were counted in inventory. You had to go to somebody's will to see who you were going to be going off to. Just all of those, like all of the things around our history is things, not humans, not human stories, right? They're not human stories. They're your inventory, and they were property, and then your records display that as property. It's like a vase. I've got 5 vases. That's it. That's exactly what this was like. So when I think about what she wrote when she was going through that, it is, to me, decoupling some of that and trying to get people to understand what it was like for real. Like, can you see that? I think that intellectually we hear it. I think we hear it, we understand it, but just like this, that little piece of paper that showed here's a tick mark from one of my ancestors, the realization of everything behind that little check mark just sent me. So in this story, the same thing happens when you start thinking about the kitchen wasn't in the house. It's a cookhouse in the back. And you had to be able to, I mean, all the different pieces, it's like you have to put yourself there. And I think that she does. And like the young lady said, she does a fantastic job of world building. It's one of the reasons I love her so much, is that you're in that space.
And one of the things, I'm glad you mentioned the cookhouse, because one of the things I want to remind us is some of the things that Black folks eat today are a result of the scraps that were available during enslavement. And I don't mean to come at y'all chitlins, but chitlins is one of them.
Yeah.
Right? Frog legs, all of the things that would be considered inedible, right? If you're not eating high on the hog, you eat the scraps. And so a lot of the food that Black folks still eat, or the chicken feet, somebody said right there, like some of the things that we consider, oh, this is Black culture, these are delicacies. No, these are a part, this is the reason. These are a part of the enslavement culture. They didn't have enough food. I think also chicken wings at one point were not necessarily eaten, right? And y'all know Black folks love chicken wings sometimes. But I want to just say, like, because they had the cookouts and because they had to make sure the white folks ate really good, they ate the scraps. They did what they could do with what was left, what they could find, and things like that. You said something else, but now I can't remember what I wanted to say. Oh, we were talking about the plantation, and we're going to close on this though because we're almost done. When Black folks were emancipated, right? She was mentioning the ticks from the slave schedule. When I want to remind people is that some of our last names came from the masters, right? If you were on the Brown plantation, this is your last name you took was Brown when you were freed. If you were on the Jones plantation, you took your master's last name. And so that's where you get some of the Pan-Africanness pushing back against that renaming in the 1960s and deciding like, okay, you could think about Malcolm X. That would be probably the most prominent person that people know. But they're pushing back against the master's name, saying this was not my name. This was my master's name, and I'm not going to accept that. And so I just wanted to also bring that point back into our focus. Y'all, we're out of time, and I ain't gonna hold you. Next week we are reading Wild Seed. Now we're in speculative fiction, fully in the world. We're in the Patternist series world. This is my favorite series. This is the series that I spend the most time in. This is the series that comes before the Parable series and the Xenogenesis trilogy. This is Butler's first published attempt to build out an entire world, and you're going to see how massive it is. And so next week we start with Wild Seed. If you need the syllabus where the page breakdowns are, it's right there on the Substack. The Substack link is in my profile. If you want to watch the replay of this discussion, it will be up tonight on the Octavia Butler Mixtape course YouTube page. That's also linked in the profile. And I think that's it. Do y'all have any closing thoughts you want to say before we hop off? Panelists?
Wild Seed. I think Wild Seed is one of her best works.
Me too.
I love Mind of My Mind, but we can't do Mind of My Mind without getting through Wild Seed. So Wild Seed next Wednesday. I can't wait to chat about it. I'm looking forward to the discussion, and I think that's it, y'all. What page? Someone asked what page are we reading up to? It's all on the syllabus. I break down the page number if you have the Seed to Harvest book, or I tell you where to stop if you don't have that book. I tell you what section to stop at. And so on what chapter to stop at. So please refer to the syllabus. All the information you need is there. Also, just keep in mind, if y'all want to be panelists next week, you're going to just have to register as a guest. Register as a guest is you got to come to class early. It's first come, first serve. And, I cycle through how the people show up on my end until they give me the capacity to add more people. We're kind of capped out at 6. But I'll see y'all next week. Be safe. Be careful. If you haven't liked the video, like the video for me. And I think that's it. That's it, y'all. Panelists, y'all good?
We good.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Good night. Bye.
Night.